All right, hello, I'm Kevin Gwynn, and my book this term was Soldier Girls by Helen Thorpe. Um, the main, the author basically wrote a story about these three women's travels through the military and during the early 2000s during the war in the Middle East. And it tracks three different women, and so it's split up into different sections of the book, talking about the three different women and what how their relation are to each other. Uh, it is a very, what's the right word? I feel like it's a very real book. It's not fiction at all. It's very real with what it says, and it's really eye-opening to people who are not been in the military at all. And it's really it shows you what that kind of experience that these specific women had in the military uh, throughout the wars, and how they originally started at the National Guard, which is one of the least fighting parts of the military, because you don't have to, you stay in the States and you basically go to train every once in a while, and then you go back to live a civilian life. But when you are eventually called, they got called to, I believe it's Afghanistan, if I'm right. Um, there was different parts they were sent to, but mainly through the main part of the book, it was Afghanistan. And there were many things they learned throughout their stay in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and even back in the U.S. Um, but there were a couple common themes throughout them that were pretty consistent, and we'll get into that later. So you can go and say your book.
Gotcha. Yeah. So my book was Brotopia by Emily Chang. And basically, my book is, in kind of like a brief summary, it's basically Emily Chang just kind of explores like how the culture of like Silicon Valley was like a male dominated culture, and how it basically like started to shut out a lot of women in basically like the rise of technology. And some big things, like what really kind of stood out to me in this was, if I want to give my own point of view about this book, in a sense it felt, I don't know if I want to say like biased, because it really is just talking about everything about why it's bad because of the things that happen for that woman, or the things that women couldn't do to enter in, to this industry or whatever. But in a sense, it is also very true. So I don't know if I want to say if it's biased or not, but some big takeaways for me would be, the one thing in the book they talked about was the Cannon-Perry test. And this is where I think I have like a definite, I have a good description of it right here. It's where they test the software developers, and where they were good at puzzles and problem solving. And it also said that they had like a proclivity for things and not people. So they set like a course for software developers, which were evaluated in the hiring processes, and it biased those processes to a narrow group of people. And basically it led to like an over selection of males to,
Mm,
yeah, to versus
yeah,
hiring women, right? And so with the Cannon-Perry test, it used computers at high, it showed that like men used computers at higher rates, and then they were more men back then were given computers as kids compared to females were given dolls. And so institutions were basically set up to glorify smarter men in computer science, and then this made it like less likely for women to want to enter into this type of field.
yeah, I think
So
that's a good explanation. Um, One thing I connect our book straight off the bat is the use of men over dominating culture,
mhm,
and that is definitely the military and I guess Silicon Valley in your case. Specifically for my book, men dominating the military was mostly because of they were able to access different parts of the military that women couldn't. There was a system set up back then. I don't really know if it's changed now, but women couldn't, there was a certain level of engagement with danger that women could get to. So men could be on the front lines and could be doing a lot more dangerous work out in the field, but
mhm,
women had to stay back at like bases and things like that, in this case, one of the girls or a couple of the girls were actually just fixing up weapons they found or fixing vehicles, things like that. They were actually put on the front lines, um, which is probably a good thing and a bad thing if you kind of think about it, because you save a lot of women life because they're not on the front lines, as well as um, they don't have to subject themselves to on the front lines of war, because that can be a horrible thing. But at the same time, for those who want to do that, they don't have the ability to do that. Uh, but it's really dominated by a men's subculture, and these women in the book had to try to be like, they became very much of man themselves, the way they've acted and the way they've learned to act and deal with the stupid men
Hmm.
in this book, because there's a lot of them and there's a lot of them in one place. It's kind of like being in like a high school locker room all the time.
Hmm.
But that's one thing I kind of relate off that bat. But
Yeah.
it's more, I guess my book is more like, I guess it makes a little bit more sense why, because it's a logistical, because women, if you more the more women you have, the more chance that you could have for offspring, and so like and stuff like that. And so putting them out in military is kind of it makes a little bit of sense, but with the Silicon Valley, it's like you said, it was a more biased approach rather than a reasonable at all.
Mhm.
So
And so, I definitely agree with your take there, how it talked about like, the how it was like hard for women in, like the military through your book and stuff like that. And my book definitely just really kind of emphasized morely how our society has basically like they basically kind of done this to women. So like the things that they've done, especially in this field, have like geared towards only these companies wanting to hire women and looking, or sorry, not women, men, and looking
men.
at like women as inferior in intelligence to men in these fields. And a good example of this would be how she talked about Google. And so it
Mhm.
basically in her book, she also talked about how Google hired early women, and they actually made an effort to hire female engineers to work
Mhm.
there, but it's kind of, Google's CEO had romantic intrigues and relationships with some of the female employees, and then the company did like a really bad job of like training and even promoting the females that work there. And then the work environment at Google was basically they valued male traits versus like the more nice and like like they value male traits versus the traits of women, I guess you could say.
What
And
is the
so,
difference between female and female traits? Like what makes it?
well, just in like the men, they seem more confident uh in things that like we talked about before, like saying with like the what's it called, the Canon Perry test, where they're just looked at as um like because it's like a male in the computer science degree, they're just looked at as like more, I guess, intelligent versus women,
Mhm.
I guess you could say. And so in her eyes and everything, it's basically just like uh people think that like the females trying to get into this field and stuff like that are just not as intelligent. I'm sorry, I don't
Right,
like going into a circle or whatever, but yeah.
right. I was just curious. I guess that kind of does relate to this upcoming reading inventory we have to do with
Mhm.
did you read that yet?
Oh,
The video game one.
I haven't read that one yet,
Oh,
but
it was about how females are struggling in the video game industry, or used to,
mhm,
in the video games themselves, as well as the industry.
mhm,
Since it's computer science and Silicon Valley is very similar to
mhm.
that, I think it's just relevant to point out with
Gotcha, yeah.
that. Over the years, I think it's gotten a lot better with that, meaning like they're respecting diversity in a lot of ways, uh, which is good. It's progressed a lot as of late, in my opinion. I think it's progressed quite well.
Mhm.
Um,
And then kind of like another thing that I want, sorry if I cut you off or anything,
no,
but
no, no,
yeah,
no.
she also kind of talked about like this thing in the book called like the bro culture. And
Hmm.
this is basically like, guys in like key roles would, come together, drink and just,
Mhm.
be kind of crazy, right? And then if it's like if women like decline to drink with, the guys, they were looked at as like more uptight and they missed like, valuable bonding time. And then like
Right,
if a woman were to like participate, you are like they're looked at as like not serious and then exposed to like a lot of sexual advances by men.
right,
So
right,
basically, she's saying that it's like a lose-lose situation for women.
right. If you
Like
go, you're going to be subjected to those comments and those actions, but if you don't go, you're going to be. I mean, in a lot of cases, a lot of company things where if you don't hang out with your company peers or whatever, sometimes you lose out on certain situations because those at companies will favor those that they know.
mhm,
And that I think that happens to a lot of people, maybe not just typically to women. I think it just happens to everybody.
mhm.
Is that if people that are more friends with their bosses or friends with their coworkers or things like that and go out drinking or go out and doing whatever they want to do, they're just going to get better positions or better things because they just know them.
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely agree with that too, because so last year I did an internship and I worked as like a technical recruiter for this company called Texasins, right? And this
Mhm,
company is like a big sales company.
mhm,
And so kind of in sales, like what they do is they do a lot of like going out to lunches, going out to dinners and like
mhm,
having these like big company parties and stuff like that, right? And some of the
mhm,
people that were like my mentors and like they worked with me, they told me that what you really need to do is go and talk to like the higher ups, the people that are your managers, your
mhm.
account managers, your presidents, your vice presidents. If you're ever in the room with them, you need to go and talk to them. And that's the thing. So I would go on like a couple of these like events with my coworkers, stuff like that, right?
Mhm.
And me being like an intern for them and me only being 20 years old, I tried to go introduce myself. And what I noticed was he didn't really, because this guy was like one of the big account managers, right? So I tried to
Right.
introduce myself, and what kind of happened was because I was young and I couldn't drink, and I couldn't participate in everything that they were doing.
Mhm.
He kind of just brushed me aside and was more like, oh
Yeah.
hey, yeah, nice to meet you, and then never talked to me again for the rest of the day after that. So in a sense, like I see what she's talking about, and I definitely agree with you, like what you just said too, right? Like it's not just the women, but it's
Mhm.
also like there's like this big stigma around if you want to do something, you might need to do some things that you might not be comfortable with yourself just to kind of
Yeah.
advance this world. So basically, like, hey,
Exactly.
I couldn't drink, so
Mhm.
these people are telling me I need to drink to make a good impression on this guy. You know what I mean? So that's why it was like when I was thinking about that, it was very like kind of eye-opening to me because it's like that's something that you know I mean yeah I feel like it does happen to women a lot, probably a lot worse, right? Because
Yeah,
I kind
for
of do
sure.
agree with that, right? Because it's like let's say your group of friends, you're at a bar or whatever, the girl and or okay sorry, let's say you look at a group of friends and there's like a girl there, that girl there probably looks like she's trying to get there for like male attention or like
Right.
she's there to like get sexualized or hit on by guys or whatever, right? But what if she's
Mhm.
actually just there to just have a good time with her friends? So
Right.
I do agree with her. It does look like a lose-lose situation for women if they go out and there are parts of these types of bonding
Mhm.
situations. And so it's like they either are exposed to sexual advances by men and they're not viewed as serious, or they're looked at if they don't want to do it, then they're looked at as uptight and oh they don't want to do the things that everybody else is doing. So it's like,
Right.
oh, come drink with us, oh but we're gonna look at you as someone who's here just to get hit on and
Yeah.
this that, versus oh you don't come drink, oh you're uptight, you don't know what you're
Right.
like,
It's a
you don't.
double standard there.
Yeah, 100%.
It kind of relates to back to my book with all the because it's mostly women or not mostly it's mostly men and there's a few women in there, but all those women do get the attention of the men because of their subjected away from their families or away from civilization pretty much. They're in their own in the middle of the nowhere in the desert. And so the only way they're able to have those like relationships or those intimate advances is to basically just keep annoying these same women over and over again because there's so many of them and they all want the same thing and they all have to deal with it. Um, but I also noticed in the book is that it's very real with it's not one-sided, meaning like the men are always the sexual dogs.
Hmm.
Um, because almost every single girl in or woman in the book has boyfriends or husbands at home,
Hmm.
yet they will still cheat on them and will still uh with other men on the base. So it's kind of a both thing. There are men in this book that cheat on their wives, and there's wives in here that cheat on their men. So it's just a whole culture over there that's really weird to me that they're all cheating on their people back at home because they have a lack of intimate attention.
Hmm.
And so it's very real to that point because I think that having a one viewed thing like, oh, all men do this or all women do this is just a bad view to have. A lot of the same issues are kind of sent both ways. It may be more issues with on one side than another, but it's still
100%.
very valid to see both sides and understanding that they both make the same mistakes.
Mhm.
And so it's
Yeah,
very real with that, and I really liked that part about it.
gotcha. Yeah, I had a quick question for you, right? So, uh, this kind of leads into like two parts of like a question, but like the
Mhm.
first question. So your book talks about how it's women in the military, if I'm
Yes,
right.
there's three women specifically joined the National Guard, which then they are called to move over to Afghanistan because of the threat of the extremist terrorist group over there at the time.
Uh,
Three
and
different ones, three different women specifically that's kind of told in chunks, kind of like this is what this one did, this is what this one did, but kind of near the end of the book. At the beginning, it divided them, saying these are their start stories to how they got into the military, and then they all started meshing into one because now they're at the same base. So it's
yeah,
kind of like three separate stories that mesh into giant one,
gotcha.
kind of.
And then their husbands were not in the military, right?
No, so one of them had a husband and they were not in the military, they were at home, and then one had a boyfriend at home waiting for them. And the other one did have a husband, but only one of the women didn't cheat, but mainly I think it was because they were older
Uh-huh.
and they didn't have any drive to have any sexual relations with anyone else, from what I know, from what I read. But two of the other girls did because they were younger, and that's just what happens when you're younger.
And so
So.
they cheated on their husbands because you said that they weren't getting like the
Yeah, exactly. Because they still loved the people back at home, but in their words, there's a couple quotes in there saying that they liked the touch of the man, and they liked the when they slept together in the same bed. It was nice because there was a warm body next to them.
what
Because they were in the horrible tent conditions and they were in horrible blankets and all that stuff, and it's nice to have somebody else as well as like the touch because you're alone out here in the middle of the nowhere. So it's like that when humans have that lack of social contact physically with each other they missed that, so they found it in somewhere else.
this is kind of like a sidetrack question, right? But well, I mean, what are your kind of your views on that, right?
Well, I
So,
don't think it's really at all good to cheat on anybody. If you have a boyfriend or if it's a husband, especially,
oh yeah,
you shouldn't be cheating on your husband, even if
100%.
it's so far away and they have no idea about it. That just makes it worse.
Hmm.
And I get it, it's really hard, but you shouldn't be, I guess you shouldn't be married. And
Agree.
some of these women have kids at home. They left. They just completely left their kids. If you have a family like that and you weren't already in the military, because they had kids and then decided to go in the military,
Mhm.
I feel like personally that's a bad decision because you're leaving your kids as well as your husband, who you've already, devoted your life to. And so I think that's just kind of a negative thing you should do. It's different for one of them since one of the women was 21, I believe, or 20 at the time they left. So they were younger and they only had a boyfriend, and it wasn't a solidified married relationship. But I still think it's screwy to leave your boyfriend and still be in the relationship and not end it and go cheat on him with someone else in the military and they didn't even tell him about it. Like they were just she was acting like it never even happened.
That's kind of what I was thinking in my head too, because when I was thinking about that, because I was like, they are like they're choosing to go away, like you were saying, and like yeah, they miss the comfort of like another, being with them,
Mhm.
right? But you don't think that their husband is, is waiting for you the same way you're waiting for him. So it's kind of like,
Exactly.
I was thinking like it was kind of like selfish of them in a sense to
Yeah.
just, oh, I really needed it that badly. It's like
Mhm.
it makes me think of like, did you love your husband, this and that,
Mhm.
which that kind of also goes into, what I was thinking about with like uh sexualizing women for one, right?
Mhm.
And in kind of her book, she was in Brotopia, right? She was talking about how like women are harassed on the internet like 10 times worse than men.
Right.
It's basically like it's dangerous and kind of and very hateful, and it's like she kind of basically explains like a lot of women experience rape threats and
Right.
a lot of like catcalling and like just comments that like men don't ever get, and women are just sexualized compared to
Mhm.
men on the internet. So kind of drawing back to like our last reading, right, that we read about like the social medias of
Yes.
Facebook,
Yes.
right, and how
Yep.
like different meta communications are looked at, or they get more interaction versus comments that are more civil towards
Mhm.
the actual Facebook post itself or whatever.
Mhm.
So what that kind of made me think about, and was kind of, I had a question for you about, right, was with that, do you think that like this new culture of like TikTok and Instagram and like the new videos and stuff like that, like do you think it insinuates uh for women to be sexualized, or what's kind of your thoughts on that?
So I am I don't have TikTok or anything around it. I don't have Twitter. Like when I think of talk like very violent social medias, the first two I think of is TikTok and Twitter.
Mhm.
Off the bat. Um, I think that here's my opinion on women being sexualized. It's kind of a rough view world, but it's a realistic view. So with the world it is now, it's true. What women are sexualized a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and so if they're like showing their bodies off in their videos, if they're showing a lot of cleavage, or if they have very short clothing on, or if they're not very clothed very well, or if they're doing insinuous acts like anything like the fad of twerking for a while. I
Mhm.
feel like if women do that and they're getting backlash and saying all this stuff like being sexualized, at this point it's really hard to say, but it should be expected at this point. If you don't want those type of comments, I wouldn't post it, or at least post it to only your friends who you can rely on. Know your audience is what I'm trying to say. You can't
100%.
control people on the internet. There's no way. You
Mhm.
can't stop people from sexualizing women very much. It's just not going to happen. It's been this way for so long, and controlling human thought right now is almost impossible.
Yeah.
You can limit comments for sure, and you can, as social media platform, you're able to limit comments, which is great. But again, it's not going to be 100% accurate. It's not going to be great. So if you don't want those comments on your profile, don't make the posts or don't make the
Mhm.
comments. In Twitter's case, it's not actually necessarily sexual. Sometimes it is, but
Mhm.
it's more of saying ideas, your own opinions out there, and getting backlash on those opinions. If you don't want backlash on them, don't post it in the first place.
100%.
If you don't want fighting against it, you shouldn't be, because the internet is just such a, everyone's behind a digital curtain, meaning like they can just say whatever they want and respond to whatever they want,
Mhm.
because they feel like they have an anonymity. They feel like they can hide behind the screen. And I just take every single comment on the internet with a grain of salt, because that's just how you have to take it. You
100%.
can't you can't go on the internet saying like, oh, this person said this, I'm gonna cry. You can't, because that's what people are gonna do. It's
Mhm.
just what it is. And you shouldn't necessarily judge your happiness based off a social media platform. If you're
100%.
trying to find your worth on TikTok or find your worth on Instagram, it's kind of, I feel like it's misplaced, because you're relying on other people's for your own validation, which you should be getting yourself.
100%. And
That's my views on that.
no, for sure. And I definitely agree 100% with what you just said, right? Because it's like, if you don't want to be like, we're just speaking, this new era and day and age,
Yeah.
right? Like obviously if like a a girl is just posting like a picture of her face and she's getting comments of like, oh, you're so beautiful, I want to have sex
Mhm.
with you, or oh, you look, you know what I'm saying? If
Mhm.
she gets comments like that and it's just like a selfie of her face, then no, then of course that is like definitely getting,
I'm
that's
hoping the
gonna,
algorithms for checking for sexual content and things like that and threats and things like that should be monitoring that,
uh,
because I feel like with the face photos, it'd be less so for people to comment these things
oh yeah,
versus like a TikTok dance that has like just a bikini on or something like that. You're
yeah,
just drawing those people towards, you're kind of, you're accepting that they're going to do that and you're complaining about it. You're basically
yeah,
saying you're
100%.
enabling it. Basically, you're saying, I don't want these things to happen, then you're enabling it to happen. If you want to not for it to happen, just don't do it, you
Yeah,
know?
100%. It's kind of like it's like, with these new kind of trends, right? It's like
Mhm.
they'll post these kind of maybe more provocative dances or like provocative
Mhm.
pictures, and then it'll kind of be like, well, I'm kind of posting it for myself and I can't help that other people look at it, right? But it's realistically, if you think about it, it's like if it was for your like for yourself, it'd be on your own phone. That's kind of for
Mhm.
yourself, right? But the moment you
Exactly.
post it onto social media, it's not for yourself anymore. It's for the whole internet to see. So you can't really blame other people for coming at you if maybe okay, and again, right? People can make the argument like, okay, well, why don't men get sexualized when they post a shirtless picture, this and that, and but I feel like that's because it's like this kind of big realm of like men don't really care, I guess you could kind of say. Because it's like if I post a shirtless picture, I know exactly what I'm posting, right? I'm
Right.
showing up my body, this and that, right? Or like let's say you post a picture of you at, the beach and you're
Yeah.
shirtless. You know you're posting a shirtless picture and subconsciously you know what you're posting, right? So it's
Mhm.
like the type of things in your head that people are gonna see. But it's like when so I do see that more with like, women when they in this kind of day and age, it's like when they post these kind of maybe more
Mhm.
a little bit more provocative pictures, they just expect everyone to be, nice and civil with it, right? But that kind of goes into like what I kind of wrote on one of my questions through this last reading as well. And it kind of stepping away from like even sexualizing women, right?
Mhm.
It kind of even just now goes into like this new kind of toxic culture of like people just leaving mean and uncivilized comments in general.
Yeah.
So it's like I put an example of like how let's say there was this girl who was kind of maybe posting like a thirst trap of herself,
Mhm.
right? But it's just her face
Mhm.
or nothing that's actually provocative, right? But
Right.
in like her thirst trap, she has a friend that maybe is like a little bit on the bigger side. If you
Mhm.
read the comments of like that TikTok,
Yeah.
like everyone in the comments who they're not complimenting her, everyone
No.
is just roasting her friend that's on the bigger
Yeah.
side, and which it made me think it was like, well, why is everyone so focused on making fun of her friend when it's just like a video, like kind of just like let people
Mhm.
be type thing, and even that is something that is not warranted, right? Like they're just posting a
Mhm.
video with
Yeah.
their friend, and now her
Exactly.
friend is receiving hate comments just by the way that she looks. So
Exactly.
so that kind of pulls away from now in this day and age, right? Like 2023, it's like instead of women getting sexualized now, it's just like insults and stuff like that.
Insults. Exactly. And that's what's kind of sucks.
Hmm.
But also, it's when the reality sits in that you don't have to engage online. I mean,
100%. Yeah.
you don't, I mean, you can use, you have to use internet now for school, for work, but
Hmm.
there's no reason to engage. I actually highly encourage getting off of social media,
Hmm.
um, and getting out. Oh, looks like we have like nine
We have
minutes
like a
left.
10-minute. Yeah.
Okay, cool. At 5 minutes, we can end it, I guess.
Okay.
But the final thoughts, I guess, on these between these books is that, at least with the digital, is that reality sits in. Um, it's not a perfect world. I feel like with this whole diversity class, a lot of focus is on how can we make it better, and that's a great goal. But there's
100%.
always going to be issues, and there's always going to be problems that strive to be able to get that goal. Because
100%.
changing it like billions and people's minds off one topic
Hmm.
is almost literally impossible.
Hmm.
Like I like to say, and I would love to say in theory, I would love if women didn't get sexualized and they could do whatever they wanted. But in reality, that just isn't how the world works. That's
100%.
just not how it's around, and trying to fix it is a hard process.
Mhm.
And so if you don't want these things and you don't find yourself happy with the things you post, don't post. Don't do
100%.
the things. Find something you find yourself well worth in.
Mhm.
Find a group of people. Find people that respect you for who you are. And if you even use social media now, you can send your posts to different groups. Make your things private. Only accept people that you know are acceptable. That treat you nicely. And that's your social media. It's just people you trust.
Mhm.
There are ways to navigate without getting hate comments. But if you're not doing that, that's just a sign of ignorance that you're not doing it. If you're complaining about these horrible comments and you're not taking steps to act or to change your ways of getting rid of it, if you're not trying to actively solve the problem, don't complain about it. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like saying I'm stuck in this situation and I can't help it. You can on the internet.
Mhm.
I mean, sure, it might be easier for guys to do it or whatever, but that's just the way the world is, sadly. And it's hard to change. It maybe eventually change one day, but I kind of hardly believe it. It's
Mhm.
been this way for years and years and years, and it's gotten better, but I don't really think it'll ever be 100%. But I think it's just ingrained in human mind
I 100% agree with you
at
as
this
well.
point. And so instead of just sitting in your own tears, groveling, I try to make yourself feel better about something.
100% agree with you because it's like I get the point of like her book, right?
Mhm,
It's just there. She really wants us to explain like the difficulties of
mhm,
like how hard it is for women to make it, right? But in my head, I was thinking the same thing as you, right? It's like my kind of main takeaway is everybody kind of has their own disadvantages, whether it be women, whether
mhm,
an African American, an Asian,
mhm,
Caucasian, like everybody has their own type of disadvantages. And my kind of like main takeaway is everyone just needs to work hard in their own way to overcome
mhm,
their own disadvantages, right? Like even you being like a Caucasian male, everyone might
mhm.
think, oh, you're automatically a racist, oh, this, oh, that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your disadvantage, right? And then,
Yep.
but people will say that you have other advantages in this way and that
Mhm,
way. And then me being like an Asian, people say I'm disadvantaged in, I don't know, like being Asian and this and that, but I have advantages over a different culture because I'm looked at as like my culture is looked at as more intelligent or this and that. And I feel like sometimes with these kind of topics, right, it's very hard to just think of one certain thing is right and
Yeah.
100% everyone's going to have their own disadvantages, and I just think that like you were saying too, right, it's just instead of
Mhm.
kind of drowning in your own tears about the things that are hard for you, you just need to work hard and get yourself out of that slump, right?
Yeah.
Work through your disadvantages and make them advantages, I guess, right? And
Yeah, and that's why I find diversity is really important for this thing, is that we can understand each other, and we can understand our differences and our disadvantages. But at the same time, you shouldn't be focusing on this. We need to make the world the perfect, because you only have one life.
100%.
Make your others around you and your community happy, your family. I wouldn't focus on too many. Don't take on a bigger task than you can set out to be. If everyone focused on making themselves happy and the others around them closely happy, it would be more happy. Instead of
100%.
trying to fix all these, going on Twitter and trying to fix racism,
Mhm.
try to fix how you're acting. you know
100%. Because you can only
Fix you.
fix yourself, and
Yeah.
you can't control 100 or 7 billion people on this earth, right? But you
Mhm.
can control at least your actions and
How
how
you're
you
acting
correct.
and how
Exactly.
you can change yourself.
So if you
I think
come
that's a really
correct,
good point. Yeah, that sounds like exactly what the point of what I was trying to say was. It looks
it's
like we have 5 minutes. I think it's 30 minutes have gone by. Is that
I
right?
I think we should be okay,
Okay,
right?
cool. Well, I really had fun talking to you, Matthew. I thought our books were very interesting, and they're linked so well to the issue of, I think, barely self-identity. I think
Mhm.
that's mainly the biggest theme throughout this all. So
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing about your book too, and it was actually fun. The time went by way faster than I
yeah,
thought. We were just able to converse about
exactly.
different things and just kind of go on about it. So yeah,
That's
thanks
what I
for
thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be, we're going to start chaining on things and linking it, and then it'd be super fast. So
yeah,
but we made time. So go
sounds
ahead
good.
and
I hope he
continue.
enjoys this.
Yeah.